All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Everybody's, and then you were, good morning. I like that. That's good. All right, so today we're going to be talking about a variety of topics, all kind of centered around final exams. I had you watch a video on final exams, and we'll talk a little bit about the tips that she gave. But what I want to start off with is you all at this point need to know what your final exam schedule is. Now, I know some of you have been through final exams here before, some of you have not. But I'm going to go to the ones that have not here had final exams yet. Your final exam schedule is not your class schedule, right? Your final exam schedule will be based on the time in which you take your class, but it won't necessarily be at the time that you took your class, right? So when I used to teach in organic chemistry, I'd have 150 to 180 students depending on the semester. And I would always get at least one or two students every semester that would email me and say, sorry, I missed the final, I thought it was at. Well, I tried to accommodate that student as best I could, but your faculty, your instructors are under no obligation to have you make up a final exam if you miss it. Okay? So, final exams can be really early in the morning, they can be in the evening, they can be on a day that you normally don't have your class. So the first thing that you all need to do is you need to know when your final exams are. And so we do have the final exam schedule up on the registrar's website. So if you go to the registrar's website with the link that I gave you, there is your final exam schedule, right? Now, if you have classes that you're taking in 8-week 2, okay, it tells you what your final exams are. Most of you, I am assuming, are in full-term courses, right? So if you are in a class day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 6:45 a.m. to 7:45, your exam will be on Wednesday, December the 1st, okay? And it will be the last day of class, right? So you can see how things are going. So if you're Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., you're going to have your exam on this day from 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Notice the time that you're given to take your final. Finals may or may not be a marathon for you. You may have finals that are kind of back-to-back with a little bit of a break maybe, okay? So you all need to be prepared for that before final exams roll around, okay? And it is amazing to me every year how many students don't really grasp when their final exams are. So it is imperative that you go ahead and build out your final exam week schedule and be prepared for that. It is not going to be your normal class schedule, okay? Just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. You have 2 hours and 30 minutes for each one of your final exams. Many, not all, but many faculty write that exam to be a 1-hour exam. I typically wrote mine to be around an hour, okay? So if you find yourself leaving at about an hour into the exam, don't panic about that, okay? There are some faculty, however, that go, I've got 2 hours and 30 minutes. I want to make it a 2-hour exam, and it's going to be comprehensive. How many people in here have classes for which you will not have a final exam, but maybe you have a project or something? Okay, that's a very different thing, right? Obviously, you're probably not going to meet on that day. However, you may be meeting at that time to turn in your project if it's not being turned in electronically, right? So you still need to know something about your exam schedule. So yes, there are a number of faculty who like to, instead of having a final exam period, they like to do a final project. How many of you have a final exam which is just the last exam of the semester? It's not cumulative. Okay. How many of you have cumulative exams, right? A lot of you will have. You need to know what type of exam you're walking into. Okay? And where do you find that information? Obviously, you find that on the syllabus. If you are unclear as to what type of final exam you have, I highly recommend right now you reach out to your faculty member and say, could you give us a little more information about the final exam? Some faculty may just put on the final exam, right, and not a whole lot of detail. But hopefully you do. We do not have a final exam in this class. We will meet one more time on December the 1st when we come back, right? And we'll do a few things. Probably won't even take the full time. We'll talk about some student stuff and that kind of thing. So I will have, no final exam for you. This is kind of an odd class that we only meet one day a week, right? So no need for it for this type of class, okay? So the first thing that you all need to do is you need to build out your schedule for your final exams. The second thing that you all really need to do is to come up with a plan for final exam week. And that video that I had you all watch, I forget her name now. Let's see, where's my... Let's go back here. All right, you all watched the 5 tips on how to study for final exams. This is the same thing that I give the pre-med students when I teach the MCAT prep class. Okay? In a way, your final exam week will be as exhausting as taking the MCAT. It's just a week long for many of you. Some of you may only have one day of final exams. Some of you may have 3 or 4 days of final exams. And you're just going to have to adapt to that, right? But there were 5 tips that she gave on preparing for your final exam. What was tip number 1? Build a schedule or a plan, right? That's the very first thing that you all need to do. You need to do that today or tomorrow. What is coming up between now and final exams that's going to throw you for a curveball? Thanksgiving break. Your success in college has no breaks. Yes, you need to have some downtime. I'm not arguing that. But you need to have a plan for how you're going to study for your final exams that includes some time devoted during the holiday break. Why is that so important?
That way you don't backtrack.
Yeah, so you don't get behind, right? Many of you may have projects due, like we were talking about, for that you're going to be spending some of your break on. But even if you don't, you're going to be off next Wednesday. We don't meet in here next Wednesday, right? You're going to be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's 5 days. So imagine being in your calculus class or whatever and not even thinking about it at all for 5 days. Coming back after the holiday, you will be in a different state after the holiday. You'll be ready to just quit. Right? This is enough of this. We're at the end of the semester. That doesn't mean you're quitters. I mean, it's just human nature. You get to the point where you're like, I'm ready for this to be over. And if you have to pick up right after Thanksgiving and really cram before finals exam, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So what might a study schedule during Thanksgiving look like? It doesn't have to be 8 hours a day. It doesn't even have to be a couple of hours a day. Okay? It depends on the type of class. And one of the tips that she gives in here too is change your study habit, right, for the type of class you have. Some of you have classes that are going to be devoted to, you got to remember a lot of facts and times and places and that kind of thing, memorization. You're going to have classes that are more focused on the application of knowledge, like your chemistry class, right? You're going to study for those very differently. So what can you all do during Thanksgiving to study for some of these classes? Well, one of the things you can do is you could build flashcards. While you're watching football or whatever it is that you're doing, right? Watch football. When the commercial comes up, go through the cards, right? You can do little things that don't really get in the way of your holiday to keep your mind fresh of what it is that you need to be doing, right? If you're in calculus and you've got to remember what a derivative is or an integral is, make some flashcards, write it down, go through it a couple of times during the day, okay? Little things can make a big difference. But I can guarantee you, if you go home on Wednesday, eat a lot of turkey or whatever you eat on Thursday, and don't review anything by the time you come back, you will wish you had, okay? Because you will be a lot farther behind, okay? What other tip did she give?
Sleep.
Okay, we'll get to sleep in a minute. But yeah, she said find a good place to study, right? That's a thing that you normally do already, right? But you need to already have a study plan for your final exam week. You need to go out on a calendar and you need to say, this is when I'm taking my chemistry exam, this is when I'm taking my calculus exam, this is when I'm taking, and how far do you think you need to back up to where you're really starting to do your study? Pardon?
Now. Yeah.
Pretty much so now, right? I mean, because you've got a break coming up, right? You really need to have plans for when you're going to study for your final tomorrow. And I know many of you are going, you want me to study for my final? I haven't even finished my last in-class exam yet. Yeah, that's just the way life is sometimes, right? You have to be able to juggle more than one ball, right? And so, especially in those classes where your final exam is going to be cumulative. And there are many classes where the instructor might say, it's not a cumulative exam, but really it is. What classes do you have that might be in that category? Chemistry for sure, right? Right? Your teacher may have said, and I don't know that this is the case, but may have said, the final exam will just be the last exam of the class. Well, that's fine and dandy, but everything built up to that point. So it really is cumulative, right? Your math classes are that way, right? It is cumulative. Whether or not it's the last set of subjects or not, it is still cumulative, okay? Now, your English class or whatever might be a little bit different because, they cover these topics. They weren't necessarily cumulative. Boom, okay? So you need to know when these things are coming up. What other tip did she give? Studying in groups, right? You will not be able to take the exam in a group format for most of you. Some of you may have a group project, but I doubt it. Too many of you. But studying in groups, we've talked about this before. What's the strength of studying in groups?
You actually are going to study.
Okay, number one, it helps force you to actually study, right? Because you feel an obligation to somebody else. What else?
Different strengths in different subjects.
That's right, different strengths in different subjects. Even if so let's say you all got together and you said, you know what, let's have one big Gen Chem exam study session. We got to know each other. You still need to know whose strengths are what so that you all can work from each other. Okay? There is also a downside to group study, right? So group study can quite frequently, if you're not disciplined, can quickly devolve into a moaning and groaning session about the instructor, the subject, whatever the case may be. So if you get into a study group, make sure you have no toxic study buddies with you, okay? You all need to be serious about your study. You need to be focused. You need to set a time. Hey, we're going to meet. We're going to study for an hour and a half and then break and go away, right? But at the end of it all, you still need to be prepared to walk into that exam and take that exam solo because that exam is going to be a solo exam, right? So what I would do, if I knew I was going to have a final exam, let's say on December the 6th, I would set December the 5th as my final study day for that particular exam. And it's just going to be a quick review. Okay? I would set the day before that as maybe being a day where I work through a lot of practice problems. And then I would schedule a few days prior to that as well, where I have some blocks of time where I am reviewing the concepts that are more difficult for me. What I always tell people about the MCAT exam is that you should be preparing for the MCAT exam 6 months before the exam, okay? Now, you all don't have 6 months to prepare for finals, so you have to kind of scale this, okay? So it's an exercise in scale. But the further back in time you are, right, the more general you can be with your study. So like on the MCAT exam, 6 months before the exam, you need to be studying a lot of different subjects, right? Just like for your finals. A week out, you can study, if it's a comprehensive exam, you can pretty much so study all 10 chapters a little bit, right? The closer and closer you get to exam day, the more and more you need to focus on those things that are causing you difficulty. Okay, so let's say you've got 10 chapters to prepare for your final exam. You know that chapters 2 and 3 are really troubling for you. 3 days before the exam, that's really all you need to be focusing on is chapters 2 and 3. Okay? The day before the exam, however, that final review day, do not focus on those things that that you haven't mastered yet. Why is that? You will psych yourself out. Who said that? Yeah, you will do that. You'll get frustrated. You'll have memory blocks. You'll have the whole 9 yards. It's the same advice we give those folks about the MCAT, except we say the week before the MCAT. If you don't know it by the day before the exam, guess what? You're probably not going to know it. That's just a reality. Okay? And I'm assuming that most of these things are not memorization kind of tests, okay? So, of course, you can memorize a few things the day before the exam, but most of your exams will not be in that category, okay? But what you need to do the day before the exam is you need to be reviewing all of those things that you have mastered, because when you get into the exam, you want those things to roll off your head very, very quickly, so that when you get to those topics that you struggled with, you have plenty of time to grapple with them, okay? When you get into your final exams, let's just assume you're going into your chemistry exam. Your chemistry exam may be close to 100 questions in length, okay? If it's cumulative, 70 to 100, somewhere in that ballpark, right? The things that you know, you want to be able to get checked off and marked, and the right answers marked down really quickly. The thing that you do not want to do is you do not want to do the exam linearly and struggle at different points. What do I mean by that? I mean, let's say you start off and the first 10 questions, you're like, man, this is great. I know these answers. I'm getting these all right. Boom, 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 boom. You run into question 11, and that's that topic that you struggled with. What do? You mark it and you skip it. Okay? Why? You don't want to waste time, and you don't want to get yourself all frustrated to where the questions that come after that you could have gotten right, you get wrong. Remember, the name of this game is just like football, basketball, baseball. It's points, right? And we don't care where you get your points from. You just got to get your points. So imagine coming to question 11 and really struggling and spending 30 minutes on that, tiring yourself out, moving on. Number one, you might run out of time, and every one that you didn't answer is not answered and no points. And the ones that you probably would have gotten right if your mind was in a good state, you stand a chance of missing, right? So I would much rather move on from that question and then come back to it at the end when I have some time, right? Use good test-taking strategy. I have seen students let their pride get in the way of their success. I know this problem. I can solve this problem. It's not going to beat me. And then, I actually had one student once who, on the organic exam, did that. I announced 5 minutes on the final exam. Remember, the final exam is 2.5 hours, and they still had 10 questions to go. You don't want to be in that boat. That one question was not worth the 10 questions that remained, right? It just isn't. Sometimes you have to do a little triage on your questions, and that's okay. Another tip. What did she say? Sleep. Sleep. If you're up till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and you're working really hard, well, that's really good at 2 and 3 a.m., but it's probably not going to be very good on your 8 a.m. exam. Your final exam schedule does not care about whether you're a night owl or an early bird. Just doesn't. Okay? And there's no excuse for it. That's just how life works. You have to adapt, right? So, and that, I know that sounds harsh, but it's just a reality. And you all need to be prepared for that. You need to be studying during times when you might be taking your exam. You're not going to be taking your exam at 2:30 in the morning, right? You're just not. So you got to get some good sleep. You got to get some good rest. The only way to get good rest before an exam, or an exam day, I should say in this case, right, is to have a plan. If you have no plan, this is what's going to happen. Thanksgiving's going to come. You're going to enjoy your Thanksgiving break. You all should, by the way, enjoy your Thanksgiving break. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But you're going to over-enjoy it, let's say that. You're going to come back to school and you're going to look at your calendar and you're going to go, oh my gosh. And you're going to start cramming. And you're going to start struggling. And all of that was avoidable.
So when we come back from Thanksgiving, we have 1 week until exam?
About, yeah, something like that. And again, it depends, you have to look on the schedule. If you had an 8-week 2 session, come back, you really might be taking an exam really quick, right? So build a plan, right? Build a schedule. And so what I want you all to do today for about 5 minutes is get out a sheet of paper and think about your final exam schedule. So I'm going to pull that back up. So again, you can find this on the registrar's website if you need to. Put your name on it. You're going to turn this in for today's attendance. Think about your schedule, right? About when your final exams will be. Think about, and then we'll talk about developing a plan. If you all don't know how to find this, you just go to the registrar's website. Let's just do that real quick. And when you get to the office of the registrar's website, as you go down, you'll find this area that says students. You click on that and you'll find your exam schedule listed right there. And you can click on that and that'll take you to it'll take you to the list and you click, of course, fall 2021, and that'll take you to the exam schedule. It's several clicks, which isn't ideal. That's why I gave you the link in your Canvas. So a 2.5-hour final, imagine having 2 of those in one day. That's a 5-hour but in-seat time. It's not your typical 60-minute exam. Two more minutes. Move on. Okay, enough on that exercise for right now. One last thing that I want to talk to you about final exams. I know many of you, through our one-on-one meetings, also have significant amounts of outside employment. I sympathize with you. I had to work when I was in college. I understand what you're going through. Okay, got to make ends meet. I get it. Final exam week, however, is not the week to pick up an extra shift. Okay? It is the week where you need to talk with your boss well in advance about your final exam schedule so that they don't schedule you at times that are going to make it difficult for you on your final exam. If you work off campus and your boss schedules you up to an hour before your final exam, what do you think it's going to be like on the day when you're leaving work to try to come take your final exam? You've left work an hour or an hour before the exam. You get in your car, whatever you do, you come here, you try to find a parking spot. What do you think that might be like?
Hectic.
Could be hectic, right? Probably not going to get something right in front of the building where you're taking your exam. Well, now all of a sudden you're struggling to find a parking spot. That's going to create a little stress, right? So work with your boss now about your final exam week, okay? If possible, ask them for the week off if you can make that work. You need to have no stresses in your life during final exam week except the exam itself. Okay? Finals week will not be a stress-free week, but you don't need to add to it. Okay? So if you have to negotiate with your boss some way or another, I strongly suggest you do that to try to come up with a schedule that works for them and you so that you don't have a stressful final exam week. Okay? Just think about it. A 3-hour class, you all or somebody paid over $1,000 for you to take that class. And if you don't do well on the final, you may be repeating that class again. And we don't want that, right? We certainly don't want that due to circumstances that could have been avoided. All right. So I had you look at 2 more faculty members this week, Dr. Rangachari and Dr. Wujin Miao. Just like the kitty cat says, meow. M-I-A-O is meow, okay, in Chinese. How were these research groups related? They're not both biochem technically, but in fact they are related in some manner because in both cases you're having to detect things, you're having to measure things, right? And so Dr. Rangachari is a biochemist, he's a biophysical chemist, right? He studies amyloids. What did you learn about, what are amyloids? Or what diseases did he talk about that amyloids contribute to? Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, kind of things, right? Amyloids, and so he studies these so-called amyloids, okay? So basically he talked to you about the fact that these proteins get chopped up, they form these smaller pieces, they misfold, they form aggregates, they form plaques, right? If you go in and look at a brain of an Alzheimer's patient, you see plaques, voids in the brain that result from this. And these things are what are believed to form the toxic side effects of things like Alzheimer's, right? So if you're interested in things like disease, if you're interested in things like Alzheimer's, if you're interested in biochemistry in general, Dr. Rangachari might be a great choice for you to start your research program with, okay? Now, did Dr. Rangachari give you any indication of what kind of student he's looking for? I'm sorry? Someone who does? Does not? Okay. Yeah, he's not necessarily looking for somebody who has a ton of research experience, right? But you gotta need to know a little something, right, when you go in. You know, a little bit of biochemistry, a little bit of interest in that area. I know Dr. Rangachari has taken students even before they've gotten into their biochem sequence. He's worked with them quite a bit, so he's a very conscientious mentor to students. He's had a number of students that have won a variety of awards, and so if you're interested in this type of work, I highly recommend you go over and talk to Dr. Rangachari. He's actually over in the Johnson Science Tower on the 9th floor, I believe. I can't remember his room number. He does, I believe, have an open door policy. If his door's open, you see him, just talk to him. Tell him who you are. Tell him why you might be interested in what he does, okay? So this is definitely what we would call a biophysical group. You will learn a lot of techniques with Dr. Rangachari. Okay? When you go into his lab, you'll learn things like gel separations and affinity columns and HPLC and other types of things that you don't know what I'm talking about right now. You will come out with a good skill set of laboratory skills. So to study these things. So it is definitely something that I would recommend if you're interested in that kind of thing to go talk with Dr. Rangachari. Dr. Wujin Miao, another chemist. He's in this building on the 4th floor. So if you get off the elevator and you walk all the way to the east, you'll run into his office and lab. What are his main interests? Okay. Not necessarily fluorescence, but he's interested in what's called electro-generated chemiluminescence. Okay, now that's a fancy word for you take a solution, you run a current through it, and it glows. Okay, and you might be wondering, well, why is that useful? Well, it actually turns out you can use it to detect things. Okay, and so he studies that. He studies that from a biological perspective. He has used electro-generated chemiluminescence to identify things in like Zika virus and other types of biological molecules. I think he's even been involved a little bit in some coronavirus type approaches, maybe, I think.
I thought in this one that he wasn't.
Oh, he wasn't?
Yeah.
I think he may have started doing a little bit of some of that. But certainly Zika virus, which there's some other ones that are mosquito-based that he's been interested in. He's also used the technique to detect explosives, right? So you can think about that from a national security perspective. You're at an airport, you want to detect explosives quickly and accurately. He's developed techniques that can be used in that area. He has used those techniques to detect contaminants, explosive contaminants and other things like that in soil. Neat little story, you may not know it. There is actually land within the United States from World War II that is considered off limits because it is technically explosive. During World War II, we were making a lot of trinitrotoluene, a heavy explosive, and back in the day, because the war effort was on, we weren't really thinking about environmental impacts. So they would literally take their waste and throw it out behind basically behind the shed, so to speak. And that entire area now is contaminated with traces of trinitrotoluene, and that's explosive. So how can you detect those things? And things like soil is of interest and other things. So Dr. Miao really is more of an analytical chemist, but he does apply that to bioanalytical, environmental bio. He currently has a grant, I believe, with the Department of Defense, with him and Dr. Wallace, on building sensors. So he and Dr. Wallace work in a collaboration on building sensors for a variety of national security kind of potential applications. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you're interested in identifying unknowns, determining amount of pollutants in water or some other environmental area, Dr. Miao is the kind of person who you probably want to go work for. Did he talk at all about the type of student he might be looking for? You don't think so? He may not have. I don't remember. I recorded these last year, actually. So it's been a while. But Dr. Miao has had a long history of working with a large number of undergraduate research students. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in more analytical things, to reach out to Dr. Miao. He would certainly be somebody who you might want to work with. Okay? All right. That's all we had for today. So we will not meet next Wednesday, because Wednesday you're off for Thanksgiving. Get your schedules ready for your finals. Start studying for your final exams. We will meet the following week. That will be our last in-class meeting. My plan for that meeting is to have you watch a video from Caitlin Burkhoff, who is graduating in December. and went off and did an internship. I want her, but we'll do that through video. So we'll actually watch that in class and then comment a little bit. I'll answer any questions you may have, and then, that'll be it. Then you'll be on to bigger and better things. And so I'll wish you all a great Thanksgiving holiday. Don't forget to study a little bit along the way, and please drop your attendance assignment off at the front on your way out. Have a great week.